So, Lyndon, thank you so much for this. And just to explain to anyone who's watching, you've just helped to deliver an afternoon of training. And so you did 1 hour of the 3 hours of our coach training program. And to be clear, the hour that you did is content that I've written. So you're delivering our content, which is slightly different than what most teachers do. But nevertheless, we can use a little bit of time. So the idea of today is to get a bit of chance for you to reflect on how you thought it went and for me to share a few thoughts as well about how I thought it went. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay. Start with the positive. So overall, that hour that you delivered, what were you happy with? What do you think? Yeah, that went well. Positive.
Yeah, I think there were quite a lot of positives. It was a busy hour. There were quite a few subsections to fit in within that hour. So I was pleased that we managed to get through those in the intended order.
Yeah.
Having prepared, I had a certain amount in my memory, and I wanted to make sure that that happened as I wanted it to. Um, and I was also pleased because I think it generated some really good responses from the people on the course. The quality of what they were thinking and their answers and their learning, I think, came across really, really well.
Yeah.
But another small thing is that we work to a time, don't we? There's a certain amount of stuff to fit in within that hour. And if you let things drift a bit, which is quite easy to do,
Yeah.
so I was quite pleased actually in terms of timings, that went quite well as well.
So on the headlines, there's quite a lot there, isn't there? Quite a lot that you're already pleased with. Let's look at some specifics. So in terms of the content, like you say, it's quite a content-rich hour, isn't there? There was, yeah. I mean, my reflections on writing it, probably one activity too many. Maybe we need to pull that back. But what did you do well in handling that volume of content we had?
I think actually it goes back to preparation again, because the more prepared you are, the more confident you are in terms of knowing what you want from that session.
Yeah.
I think that has helped today in terms of how it went. What you can't factor in is unpredictables like, will the group reference the last part of that, before I got to it and that sort of thing. But I think I was quite pleased in terms of the having a little bit of flexibility within that,
Yeah.
even though there was a structure.
Yeah.
But again, I refer back to I think the more confident you feel you know your subject matter, the more able you are to do that. And I would hope that that would improve, doing it a second time or doing it a third time. So I was pleased with that because, as you say, it was quite a busy session, and I just didn't want to miss something out. And also, Charlie, in terms of it being a program that's written by yourself, you feel that responsibility to do a really good job in terms of what would Charlie be thinking? If Charlie was doing this, would Charlie be saying something similar? And that's again about quality and wanting to deliver the best possible that I can, really.
Yeah. And it's annoying that I'm actually here, isn't it? It'd probably be better if I was
Yeah,
somewhere
yeah,
else.
yeah. It'd
Yeah.
be
Okay.
fine if I was. Yeah,
No worries. All right, well, let's maybe hone in on one bit of the content, perhaps like all the stuff all around the goal setting, that bit of work, and the explaining, the understanding, they're getting their thoughts and all the whiteboard stuff. What did you do well? What did you think you handled well about that chunky bit of content?
I think as I say we because we talked a little bit about it. We got the big picture across quite clearly in terms of the key part of this session is goal setting at the
Yeah.
beginning of a coaching conversation. I think that came across, and that supported that by that visual, that slide, which kind of reinforced that for us. So I think getting clarity was really helpful.
Yeah.
But also, what I thought went really well from there was we asked them to generate some questions
Mm.
around that, and they were really good. The quality of what they produced, a showed us that they understood what we were talking about, what we wanted, but also, made it very clear that they were finding that bit valuable, and therefore they were able to generate some really good questions. So, yeah, I think clarity is really important. And again, when you're delivering, facilitating training, it's, I suppose, being a teacher for a long time, you know how important it is to make it absolutely clear. This is what it's all about. This is what we're going to do. Is everybody clear? But I think managed to do that today, and that is trickier in a busier session because you
Yeah.
can always, inadvertently miss things out or forget to say things that and with adults as well.
Yes.
Is everybody happy? Is everybody clear? You know what we're doing. So
Well, thanks for that. So you got a real sense that you're managing this content. You're getting because we do facilitate, right? You're getting the ideas and the thoughts out of them, and the messages are getting over well. Okay, shall we? Let's look a little bit about the participants, about how you're working with them, and the relationship that's developing, but also what you're having them do and how you're engaging with them. All that general bit about working with the other people. Again, what were you happy with? What went well?
I was happy with the relationships we built because clearly there's a facilitator participant divide there. And we were fortunate we were working with a relatively small group. So pretty quickly in a session, you build that relationship. Um, and yes, we have content that we're facilitating, we're delivering, but actually the large part of that is actually enabling them to be able to do what we want them to do.
Yeah.
And that is a different thing to teaching somebody or telling somebody or directing somebody. So we are absolutely facilitating. And I think that is really important. But then you also get within that small opportunities to chat a little bit more informally or to give them a bit of feedback after you've heard a response from them, to comment on to validate their feedback and responses and so on. And I think all of those things actually build a really solid, trusting relationship. I think the trust is really important. They've signed up they've paid money to come on and do this piece of training. To develop that level of trust and credibility, I think is really important too in forming that relationship. They feel secure in what they're hearing. They feel secure in the fact that it's not all about us. It's really all about them and what they're learning from it. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I think the relationship is really important.
And I really like the way you describe it. And in that hour, any specific examples that comes to mind when you think that interaction with one of those people in the group, was in that good flow that was working well?
Not necessarily specific there, but that when and I think there was an occasion, I can't remember if it was Nicola, but somebody asks a question almost as a query. I'm thinking, what about, or is it okay if? And to be able to validate that and reassure them, I think is really good. I can remember one example of that in today's session. I think it means they're thinking, and it means they're looking to us for some kind of guidance or direction. Direction's not the wrong word, but guidance, I suppose. But yeah, I think that's one that cropped up today.
So you've talked quite a lot, and you've given us loads of positives about generally about how you handle the content, but also how you work with the participants. Anything finally to say about the positives?
Only really to be in the luxurious position of being a facilitator is to see and hear their comments right towards the end of that session about how much they felt they'd grown from that and learned from that and progressed from that. That's kind of really the icing on the cake, isn't it? Really, it just cements the fact that the session has gone well from their perspective.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you, and thank you for sharing that. Oh, and if I concur with everything you said. I think that I really am in full agreement. But I'd add in a couple of extra things of appreciation of what I observed. I think firstly, this was the first time you've delivered that, and it's probably in all of those 24 hours of this program, probably the fiddliest hour for and it's the first time we've done it, and we are changing it, so there's all of that uncertainty. I think that the prep, you mentioned it, but it was really clear. I was watching you today and thinking, you really have prepped this, you've thought about this, you've watched the vids, right? And you know what's coming up, and you can make reference to those videos, which means that it shows that you're as in the content as anyone else. And I thought that's really good, and that's really neat. So definitely that thing on the content, and the sense of flow and unhurriedness about it. Yes, we had lots to do in that hour, but it was fine, and I never got a sense of you were moving them on or rushing them on. You didn't use that type of panic language that sometimes we can do. Right, okay, not much time. Let's speed it up. So there was that sense of that. And I think the relational stuff, it feels like it feels very nurturing, but it also feels very adult. Like you're an adult speaking to them as adults, showing appreciation for them, understanding their pain, remembering what it was like day one for you as a coach, and doing all of that kindness. You do that really, really well. But also you remember some specific examples, and you always have something that hooks from what they've said to something that you've experienced as a coach. So I think all of those things, made your session, if I dare use the O word, made it outstanding. Super, super strong and great to see. And
Mm.
I was sitting there watching, and delighted, really pleased. So thank you.
It's really good. Thank you. Yeah,
And
really appreciate that.
well, I'm pleased. And I hope you're not sitting here queuing up here. But what about? Well, what about? I mean, we have to talk about even better is because no one's perfect, nothing's perfect, and we will have those. But I hope that you can let these positives really hold and stay for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we talk a lot about, reflection, reflecting straight during and straight afterwards. Um, yeah. And yeah, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, I suppose, and you always will look at the bits. And I am reflecting on the bits that actually I want to do better or
Yeah.
differently and, need to do better. But yeah, it's lovely to hear the positive feedback. It's lovely to have that validated because even if I go away thinking, I think I did that quite well, for somebody to say, yeah, that did go, pretty well, is great. It's lovely.
Good.
Thank you.
Oh no, no, I'm really pleased. I'm really pleased. And so let's take the even better ifs in the sort of spirit they're intended as technical. Maybe you can name a couple of things that you think I'd do differently next time, and I'll name a couple, and then that would be good to give you something next steps to work on. So a couple of things you do differently.
Yeah, I think one thing is to make sure that and this was interesting today because the session was busy, is to make sure that I'm closing off individual sections
Yeah.
if relevant. Um, Make sure that even though there's a lot to fit in, still not denying them the opportunity just to have 30 seconds to, make a note or reflect or just a little bit of quiet, you know,
Yeah.
time like that. That I think, particularly on today's one, might have slipped. Um, and I also think just constantly reflecting on the balance of, am I saying something? Should I be saying something? Is it too much of me saying something? Just I think that's something that I need to reflect on and that will evolve. And I again think that perhaps more experience with the materials will possibly help that process because I'll probably know when to say nothing, when to say something, when to say a bit less and a bit more. Um, Whilst having fidelity to the structure of what we're trying to facilitate,
Yes.
without drifting off too much. And I think in that sense, it's being relaxed about it. I was quite conscious today that because I was thinking there's a lot to fit in, I mustn't miss something out, I mustn't go away every time, and so on and so on. I tend to then almost over prepare, and therefore it's not perhaps as relaxed in the style that I would want it to be. And I'm hoping that didn't come across too much, but I felt that, and I felt I needed to be a little calmer about the way in which it came across. Um, so yeah, they're all really useful reflection points. And in fact, the whole process of reflecting and evaluating, um, if you're not careful, you can get out of the habit of doing those things,
Yeah.
particularly when you do something. I've done this before. I've done this before. I've done this before. I think it's a really, really good and important habit, even if it just takes you 5 minutes at the end of a training session or something like that.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, and I'm glad you've got two. You've named two, and you're really clear about them. And I'll name two. One I think is part of yours, and then one that I think is worth a mention. I agree with you. I think trying to work out on the debrief feedback thing, when we have all six of them speak, do you comment after all of them? Do you comment after every second one? Or do you wait until the end and just offer one comment? I think it is probably it's different every time, but yeah, I my impression was like if we're going to put a number on it, it was like probably 10 to 20% less commenting, something like that. Not 50% less, not
Yeah,
90% less, right? But just a bit less, just a bit of, the occasional great thanks. I'll say something about that later, and then take a couple more, and then say something a bit more cumulative to bring it to a close, something like that. So I think, yeah, I think you can, yeah, I think you can just pare that back a little bit, not loads.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that
Okay.
makes sense. Yeah.
So that was one, and then the other one. It's a bit strange because I think it's you did it in Word, but I think you need to do it in Word and in Body. And the it is like showing your appreciation. Like you like that. I mean, what they produced, I felt in that first hour, and that first bit you did around all of the words, the definitions, and all that. I thought it was brilliant, really brilliant, and super super strong. And you did say that. But I don't think you said it with you. You used to be a primary school teacher, right? I don't think you said it like a primary school teacher. And I know they're
Right.
adults, but they needed a smart. They needed a bit of. I mean, not like wow, you're all geniuses, but I just think they need. You said this is really very good and very strong, but I think if you'd have made it congruent with your physicality, there would have been a bit like, no, he really means it. No, he really does mean it's great. As
Mm,
opposed to it felt like it was a comment that needed that edge.
yeah, yeah,
Does
yeah.
that-
Makes sense. Agree.
okay.
Um,
But then
that's really useful to know.
you haven't got to go all jazz hands, but just and I risk this as well. I'm sometimes a bit on the clinical side. So I think just dialing that up a bit could be really useful for you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And sometimes, the calm demeanor is a bit too calm. It's a
Yeah.
bit needs a bit livening up. I suppose, especially on Zoom, because you can only see
Yeah.
this bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's absolutely fair, and I'll consider that. I've already thought about, you think a lot about facial expressions when you're on a camera.
Yeah.
What is that saying?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
and you're
And
right, they were great. They're really, really good.
that's
So
great.
yeah,
Yeah. And you're right, it is facial expressions. And sometimes I realize if my camera's too small, you can't do, hand gestures or they can't see the hand gestures. And, if you're in a room, you would be doing those type of, so I'm looking like my Jewish grandmother now, but you would be
yeah.
doing a lot of that stuff, wouldn't you?
What's it really interesting? I'm thinking whilst you're talking about that, and one thing that I'm very conscious that I'm doing is not wanting to look down to make sure I'm absolutely clear what comes next. But possibly what's happening is that's happening at the expense of proper feedback and congratulation and validation to what they've just done.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that's a little bit of it, because if I get too carried away doing that, I might think, oh my goodness, what comes next? But yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But again, that's all part of having next steps right up here so that I don't devalue the bit that should come before that.
Yes.
But yeah, yeah, no, it's all good.
So if you take all of those three or four things as a bundle and work on them, what would it mean to you if you notched up those, do you think, in terms of your facilitation approach?
Well, it would mean I'm very sad about, when I come off any kind of training facilitation session, I kind of score myself and I say to myself, how do I think that went in terms of 10 out of 10? Some might say, okay, well, 7 out of 10, not bad. These things went quite well. So it would actually, in numbers, it would mean I could get up to a 9 or a 10. So I could do that in terms of my own reflection. But that would mean I'm giving the participants a better deal, and also in terms of working with you, Charlie, it would mean I would feel that you were super happy with what had happened, also on the fact that I was reflecting and then wanting to do it even better next time. Um, so on all those fronts, it would mean I could go from a 7 to a 9 or 7 to maybe even a dangerous 10. Um,
Well,
but because the so what bit of that would be so that the guys who are on the course
yeah.
are getting the best possible value, from me.
So there's a reason for doing it. Well, we are talking now on the 5th of December when on Strictly everyone's getting tens all the time, right? So we're
Yeah.
clearly in the right time for having on tens. Okay. Two questions to finish off. The first question is you're learning from having a debrief. This is a sort of a teacher trainer reflective conversation. What's been your learning from this conversation?
I think the learning from this conversation is that it doesn't happen very often. This type of conversation doesn't happen often enough. I do work for Well, I can even think back to headship actually, when that sort of conversation didn't happen often enough. I can think to other groups of people that I work with and for at the moment, and that type of conversation doesn't happen at all. And so I think the value is A, that it's happening in the first place, but also the value in, so what difference does that conversation make? It just, I think, is a really positive thing to have time to think, time to reflect, time to also get feedback, genuine feedback from someone who, is interested in doing a really good job. And some of that's validation, and some of that stuff I haven't thought of,
Yeah.
But until someone gives that back to you, how on earth am I going to, come up with that next step, or, a way to improve further? So all of those things really valuable, really important,
Right.
which is sometimes a bit sadly lacking, to be honest.
Yeah. And yeah, we can find the reasons, can't we? Time and whatever. But thank you for engaging it. The last question I've got is, what are you enjoying about this? What are you enjoying about this work of getting in a group and facilitating? So, what did you enjoy about today's hour?
Well, loads actually. I mean, I enjoy the engagement with you, with yourself, and with the content. And that, that when you do something for the first time, I was a little bit nervous, well, quite nervous actually, in terms of getting it right, do things, and so on and so on. But working with a group of, it's like working with a great group of compliant children, except these people are adults, Um, but I often make very sort of similar comparisons in the way I used to work with children, the way I now work with adults. It's really rewarding because as a facilitator, as I said, it's not all about me as a facilitator. I'm not the expert who has all the answers. I'm just somebody who's kind of doing a fair amount of prep with a product, if you like, with a course. That hopefully, with what I'm able to do with that, is just giving them great value for money and making them good at what they thought they were going to come onto the course to be good at. So I've rambled a bit there, but I love working with people. I love collaborating in terms of collaborating with you as the facilitator and the author and so on. Again, why? Because as a result of what I'm doing, I might do a decent job for them and they become better coaches.
Okay.
So it's
Well,
quite a
I'm
lot.
pleased. I mean, I asked that question, yeah, as a positive way to finish off this conversation, and and I really appreciate it. I appreciate your work, and I appreciate your efforts, and I appreciate that you've really hit the ground running, and you did many good things today, and you're leaving today with some good action points as well, so that
Mm,
you're nicely positive in that improvement cycle. And thank you for having this session on recording as well. I appreciate it.
no problem. Thanks.